Hello and welcome to the interview. It's a pleasure to be with Sunila today. Sunila Galappatti, the current festival director of the Galle Literary Festival. Warm welcome to the program.
Thank you.
You did say before we started shooting that you were a very different person before you took up the mantle of being festival director. So I do know that you've been heavily involved in theatre, the arts. Perhaps the audience would like to know what actually you did with regards to both fields before you came to Sri Lanka and took up the Galle Lit Festival, which we'll talk about later.
Well, I didn't actually say I was a different person. I'm very much the same person, but I used to do something completely different, which is I am a theatre director, and also I used to commission playwrights and advise them as they wrote their plays. That's actually the bulk of what I used to do. This was in the theatre in London, and I was what's known as a dramaturg. You come across the term before?
Maybe many in the audience wouldn't have.
Well, I hadn't either when I saw this job advertised. I was sitting around a dining table with 6 friends, all looking for jobs, all sort of recently out of university.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And there was a job advertised for assistant dramaturg at the Royal Shakespeare Company, and we didn't know what it meant. And we looked it up, and there was a dictionary definition, but it didn't really help much. And so I applied for the job, initially as a joke, and then went along to an interview where it just suddenly sounded very exciting. And I was hired by someone who I think was quite perverse and liked the fact that I'd applied for this job not knowing what it was. So I ended up doing that for, 8 years.
With the RSC?
Initially with the RSC.
Right.
And then I left the RSC because it's a large public theatre company in the UK, and you could end up growing up in a parallel universe. I felt like, if I didn't leave, that would be the sum total of my experience. So I moved to Newcastle in the north of England to work for a former Marxist co-op that used to take plays out to working men's clubs, and still very much had the politics that it always had. Sometimes was producing plays for a group of people that didn't really exist anymore. But had a very, very good ethos as to why they were making the work they were making. And I worked there for a while and then went freelance, and then decided that I'd been away from Sri Lanka for 10 years. I lived in one country for 10 years, and that was the very first time I'd done that. And so I moved.
Your schooling was in Sri Lanka?
My life began in Peradeniya, really. I mean, well, I was actually born in London, but came back 10 days later, and lived in Peradeniya till I was 8, with a brief stint in Holland, and then Peradeniya is much more home than Colombo. Colombo I've lived in for about 5 years in total, but all in short installments.
And you've been in Colombo since you came back?
I have been in Colombo since I came back, if you don't count, weekly trips to Galle.
Now, let's talk about that, though. I mean, it's around the corner. It's the 4th.
This is the 4th,
This is the 4th one, the 2nd of which you've been festival director. It's now on the map of literary festivals of the same genre. Anything new that we should be expecting this year?
Certainly. I mean, I think that in the first 5 years of a festival like this, we hope that it would move exponentially from year to year. And when you say it's now on the map, I mean, I have been very lucky in that I inherited a festival that was already on an international map. So in a way, I had the luxury of thinking about how we wanted to evolve it, things that we could do, gaps in the festival. And of course, it also evolves with the taste of whoever's running it from year to year. So I'm very excited about this festival. I feel proud of the festival we've put together, because the writers that we're bringing in this year, in some ways, are people who have come from very unusual and interesting perspectives and can speak to things that concern us, but from their own experiences. And there are a number of dimensions.
No, but I was going to say, I mean, part of the reason why I and many others like the festival is that it is always echoed or articulated through an international voice, concerns that are shared.
Of course.
Concerns that are Sri Lankan, but in a sense almost more universal and global. So that's all. That's been one of the reasons why I think a lot of us like the festival. In terms of an enduring concern, though, and I'm sure you're no stranger to this, it's the litany of questions around the pricing of the tickets, the exclusivity of the event, and for some even the elitism of it. In your 2 years, how have you sought to address some of these things that have been thrown at the festival?
We've thought very much, actually, to engage with the concerns about the festival. We have to start from the point of view that the festival makes roughly 15% of its running costs through ticket sales. So it doesn't much have the option of not charging for tickets, for example. But whether you maneuver the ticket prices a little bit this way or that way, they still cut out a large group of people. So one thing we've done this year is to introduce more free events. So that in any given festival day, you can go to 2 or 3 events that are completely free. And that's something that I'm very pleased about, because it means that there's a way of attending the festival without paying for tickets. And the other, I mean, there are lots of dimensions to this, and the other thing that has been really important to me is that the festival shouldn't be an import. It shouldn't just land on Galle and then disappear again and be this international import that comes in and goes away again. So we have been working with schools in both the Galle and Mathura zonal districts on a program that's really about promoting creative reading and writing. Because as far as I'm concerned, I mean, I don't want to go into schools and...
English.
This is in English. The medium of our workshops is English, but there are concerns that apply regardless of the language. And we've taken down groups of readers who are writers, dramatists, teachers, journalists, to read to kids stories from all over the world and think about the sorts of stories that they want to write themselves, and what makes a different sort, what makes different sorts of stories, and then run a series of writing workshops with the same kids writing their own stories. And what was important to me there really was to get these students to write from their own experience, because I think a lot of the time, if creativity isn't emphasized in their classrooms, then they write things that they expect an adult audience wants to read. And certainly at the beginning of these workshops, we would find the students a bit scared, really, about what it was we wanted and what was correct.
I think you're running against the education system, which is regurgitation.
Well, possibly, but it felt like it was a nice space in which to just take off all the boundaries and say, this is about you writing the sort of story you might want to read yourself. And so for the first time, we are also adding to the festival a day of events for Galle schools. So for 100 students, I mean, it's not as broad as we'd like it to be, but it's a start. 100 students from the schools that have been part of this program, so that the events are dedicated entirely to their interests, their concerns, their levels of language, and involving the writers that are coming in internationally, involving local writers, involving, a historical scavenger hunt in the fort, for example.
So it reaches out to them and engages them.
But I mean, I have one more thing to add, actually, which is that the other thing that we're really pleased is that this year we've brought in performers, Sri Lankan performers as well. So it's about showcasing exemplary Sri Lankan artists beyond the field of writing.
The
Chitrasena Dance Company, as well as the Ravi Bandhu Vidyapati Drum Ensemble. And these will be large open-air performances, we hope, and therefore also open to all. So that it's a way for residents of the fort, as well as our audience that comes into Galle, to enjoy some of the best performances that we have to offer.
And in your first festival, you had theatre as well, Mind Adventures,
of course,
performing. So you always, you expanded it beyond the literary, strictly speaking, to bring in your own passions and love as well.
I wouldn't say it's only mine, and also it is expanded beyond the literary in that there are architectural tours, there
Walking,
are, and it's partly about people engaged, about interesting conversations. So I have to say that I stress the festival aspect more than the literary aspect.
Let's talk about literature. What moves you, Sunila? What's the kind of literature that
actually
that you
literature moves me, and I'm
all literature or particular genre?
I mean, I actually, my background is a basic bachelor's degree in English literature. And I never thought that I would end up making, that would be the heart of my work, and as it has been both in the theatre and now. And gradually I think that more and more literature makes me happy.
Is it literature, core literature, or is it reading a particular
It's about
kind
ways
of
of expressing the truth. And I think that actually finding ways to express what are the truths we want to tell is also part of acting on them. And I think I've grown to have more rather than less respect for writing over time.
So you said you had less respect for
more respect for writing.
Yeah.